listening to the Recovered Life Show.
Oh, thank you so much for mentioning that. Because I was traveling, I didn't get to spend as much time as I normally do
Right.
in Recovered Life. And so it was great this weekend to go through some of the posts, and I was commenting on them this morning. I'd like to just give a little shout out real quick to everybody who's listening on Facebook Live. We have a lot of people that listen actually on Facebook Live in the mornings, and this is how they start their recovery during the day is an episode of the Recovered Life Show. So we'd like to welcome all of our Facebookers out there.
Hello.
Welcome. So, speaking of letting go, when we were talking about and enjoying life, I wanted to bring up this first little topic this morning and see what your thoughts on it. Both of us do recovery coaching, and both of us are very active in our own recovery.
Yes.
And one of the things that comes up all the time is surrender, which
Right.
I think is really misunderstood. And I wanted to bring up the topic today is, why is it so hard to surrender? Why is it so hard, Kristina? If you had the answer to that, it would be like, you could just okay, we're done.
Everybody would know. Everybody would know.
Everybody would know. No one would have to do anything with recovery anymore.
Well, to surrender takes you out of the perceived control of your life. And I'll tell you, this is not just a recovery problem. It is a problem in the world. Last week, I was on another clubhouse room that is not about recovery. And there was somebody there who had all of the success trappings. And the book that he recommended that everyone in the room, we're talking hundreds of people, is The Surrender Experiment. And it really, really showed me that, wow, this is not just a recovery problem. I read the book in 2 days, and it was a beautiful, beautiful tale from Michael Singer about letting life flow to you and acceptance. And I kept thinking, yes, this is what we do in recovery. But it feels like you're falling off a cliff. Every time I feel myself resisting something, I try to think of that meme. Have you ever seen that meme where the person's holding on to a cliff and the person above is saying, just let go, and the person below is saying, surrender, and you realize there's just about 2 feet between the person's leg and the ground? Yes. It does. It really sets us off. But in the years that I've been in recovery, I have started understanding and being able to think ahead of time. Maybe if I just didn't try this today, maybe if I just waited and saw what happens, I would have a little less pain in the resistance, a little less. And every single time that I've been able to surrender, it has always been for the better. Always.
Well, I've always said that, recovery would be amazing, especially early recovery would just be a dream if you didn't have to deal with powerlessness and unmanageability. Those are two, I said that on a Recovered Life discussion. Everybody laughs, but it's like, it's totally, it's one of those things that everybody laughs because it's true, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I cannot, I hate those. And I'll just tell you, almost 3 decades in recovery, the idea of powerlessness and unmanageability, it makes my skin crawl. I don't like it. I don't.
Right.
I don't like the idea of, now I've accepted it to an extent that's just the way that it's got to be. But
sure.
I don't like it. I don't like it. And, and I think one of the things that, with surrender, why I like this topic a lot is that I think people and I'm going to talk about early recovery now. I'm talking about maybe surrendering. I think you have to surrender all the way through your recovery.
Yes.
At first you're surrendering the fact that you can drink like a normal person, like just anyone else, right? So you have to let go of that. And then after you let go of that, then I think the next thing you got to let go of, typically what I see is I've got to do this forever. I got to do this forever.
So
right?
True.
And then you gotta let go after that of ideas. Then it's all about letting go of previous ideas that you have, beliefs that you have. That is the tough part. That is the tough part. And I think letting go of beliefs sometimes is harder actually than letting go of that you're never going to drink again.
So true. And one of the things that I do when I work with people is kind of root out what these beliefs are. And I don't think that we get taught to actually question our own belief system near as much as we should. And a lot of times our belief systems, I would say 99% of the time, we have these belief systems that we don't know where they came from. We don't know exactly why we think a certain thing. We aren't taught to question our thinking. And it's all about agency and realizing that I cannot presume to think I know better. And that is part of surrender. Me realizing I don't know better than life, the universe, my higher power, I choose to call God. I don't know better than God. So when I'm resisting and thinking, well, it shouldn't be this way, my idea is better, I know what I need to do, it's me presuming that that I know better. And isn't that sweet and adorable? And it's, I don't beat myself up for having that, but being able to name it and go, oh, this is me trying to control. This is me trying to control people, places, and things. And what happens when I try to control people, places, and things? Pain. Pain happens. And so I am definitely, I'm a driven person. I want to do everything that I want to do. I'm not telling people don't get up and do something. This is not what I'm saying. But when life shows up, sometimes, no, all the time, rolling with it is actually the easier, softer way.
Well, I think, what I have seen in working with others in recovery and in my own recovery is that, and this goes from, it's interesting because the principle is the same, whether it's about, am I accepting the fact that I'm an alcoholic or, these are big, like, look, we know just through in the recovery business that those are huge milestone marks, right? Like,
right.
Oh, I can't drink like other people. I accept the fact that I can't, right? Like, so these are huge things, but it could be something as much as like something small, like a way that you act out or something that you do that's not right, right? It could be something very, very, could be the way that you eat. Like, hey, I can't eat this anymore, right? Like I've had that. Like, I was telling you the other day, it's like, I love a ton of barbecue and stuff like that, but I can't eat that all the time, right? Like, so I realize like, oh, I can't have that every weekend, right? So, I think that people get confused a lot of the times, and this is where I see relapses happen, and this is where I see a lot of misery happen. They confuse surrender with a parlay, and a parlay is different than surrender. A parlay is like in battle when you say, look, I will give up if you meet these different conditions.
Right.
Okay. So I'll give up if you make sure you don't hurt anyone, if you make sure, right. If you make sure that you can give my town back. This was like a battle term, parlay.
Yes.
It's a negotiation. Surrender is not a negotiation. You either surrender or you do not. Surrender is unconditional. So I think what happens is a lot of people come in and say, well, I surrendered, but they didn't. What they said is like, well, I'll get sober if I can keep my job, or if he or she does not leave, or if I can keep my money, or if I can keep doing this activity, I'll get sober, right? But that's not really surrender, right? It's a parlay.
I think it's enough in the beginning. Let's be honest. I think that it might get you in the door, but it's not going to keep you here. And, the more that I resist something, the more I love the fact that you use the word battle, because that describes it exactly how it feels. And one of my biggest lessons of surrendering is when my son received a diagnosis. And that took me a long time to accept and surrender that this was what was going to happen in my life, and that he was going to need extra help, and that my life wasn't going to look like how I thought it would. And with that, there comes pain, there comes, frustration and anger. And I had to actually surrender to those emotions as well. And once I was able to do that, he was happier, I was happier. And it really, really did help me realize that resistance is futile. Resistance is futile. And I would say anytime I want to battle, autism spectrum disorder, autism is going to win. So I need to go with it and figure out what I have to do. But at the same time, show up and do the next indicated step. So it is not an easy thing. I don't want anybody to think that we're here saying all you have to do is surrender and things will be okay for you. Doesn't really work like that. But in the end, God's ideas are always better than my ideas.
Well,
always.
I found that the surrender first, especially the first surrender, we're talking
Mhm.
about, am I going to continue to drink? Am I going to continue to use drugs? Am I going to continue to be codependent? Am I going to right like this
Uh-huh.
decision? I always found this has just been empirical data that it always has gotten better for the person. I think primarily like why
Yes.
is that? Like, I ponder a lot of stupid things sometimes like, well, why is that? Like because I think everybody is looking. I think everybody who most of the people that I meet in recovery are seekers, right?
Yes.
I think God gets, God creates drunks, if you will. So seekers will have will have something that will ignite that because maybe that would not have happened if it
Right.
wasn't for this, right? Because I think the interesting thing about the letting go part of it and the surrender part is what is on the other side. We've already predetermined, we've scripted, well, it can't be better than our idea, but yet
Yes.
our idea got us to where we were. And
Right.
that's really not working well, right? So I think what it really does is open up ideas that are not your own.
Yes.
It's the pathway, and I think that's why when you see a lot of the times, and you hear these stories all the time, Christina, and I know you've experienced them. A man or woman living under a bridge,
Right.
20 years, all of a sudden one day surrenders, and
Right.
then everything starts to open up and change for them, almost seemingly out of nowhere, right? But it wasn't out of nowhere. Like what what you start to learn in recovery is that it was there all the time. It was just they were not open to it, right?
Right, right. You stayed in one room wondering why doors aren't opening, and the minute you were
Exactly.
willing to put your hand on the knob, all of a sudden the door is open. And it does happen all the time. I heard when I first started, and I'm from a 12-step program, God brought me to AA, and then AA brought me back to God. And I totally believe that. I totally believe that. I would never change or exchange the life I have to drink, quote, normally. I was talking to somebody last night who just celebrated her first year, and we spoke about this very thing. I was discussing with her about the vaccine, that you and I talked about last week, and how strange it is. And I can honestly say that if I could, quote, drink normally and not have the 12 steps and what helped me, I wouldn't want it any longer. I would not want it.
I just got to tell you, people who are listening to this that are not on the live stream, you could see my face. I have no idea why people would want to drink normally.
Right.
I find this so crazy. Like that's the last thing that I think alcoholics think about is like, well, if only I could drink normally. We
Right.
don't understand normally anyway,
No,
right?
we
Like,
don't.
so what if we understood normally and could really grasp that, we could get all I think I think that the confusing part for any kind of quote normies, I hate that word, but any
Mhm.
normies that are out there, people that are not alcoholics, and say, well, why can't they just kind of see that they're drinking themselves to death? It's like, no,
No.
they really can't see it, right?
No.
Like, so, and I get this now as being a recovered person. It's like you look at it and it's sad. You look at it and you go, this is totally insanity. I see all that, but the thinking process that somehow alcoholics are going to think like, oh, gee, I want to drink normally,
Right.
right? Like, I don't know about that. That just seems so dubious to me.
It does, it does, and I mean, imagine I have for many, many years felt like the fact that I drank alcoholically was one of the best things that happened to me because of where it brought me, because of I actually had this ability to open up a life plan and learn how to surrender. And thinking about just that room last week where somebody is later in life and saying, wow, this book really changed my life. I feel
Mm.
completely blessed that the 12 steps were around, that gratitude and surrender was one of the tenets, and it really, really did not only save my life physically, it opened up the ability to have a beautiful life and learn
Well,
how to let
yes,
go of resistance.
yes. And I think that this is the process. I will have to tell you one of the things that I think people in recovery have an edge over. And if you're listening to right now on a podcast or you're listening to this in your car driving, I think really pay attention to what I'm going to say here, because I think this is important. The one thing I've learned is that we do have an edge because we're constantly going through trying to lock on to our own ideas
Uh-huh.
about what we think is right and what we should do. And some of those are great, by the way. And I think
Yes.
and some of those are really good ideas and things that we should do. And then constantly sifting through the uncomfortableness of finding out which ones do not work. And
Right.
then the process of letting go of those to open up new things. This process you learn in recovery. And I have to tell you, you and I both know a lot of people, pain and suffering exists outside of people that are in recovery.
Sure does.
And this is a process that people have a hard time with anyway. I
They
mean,
sure
just
do.
the idea of identifying with this is no longer working with me. For me, I'm going to let go of this. I know plenty of people who do not have drug or alcohol problems, never have had drug or alcohol problems or any addiction problems, that suffer from this, that can't do this successfully in any level of their life.
Right. And, the idea that you can get through life without having struggles or with things going your way consistently is something that we learn, from a very young age. It's that whole idea of, this is how I'm going to control the narrative period in my life. And if things don't work out that way, I don't really have any option. And once I realized that it was a gift for me to get it in my 20s, I too wish, oh my gosh, if you could just get this concept, if you could just understand that all you have to do is let go, and there's only 2 feet between you and the ground, and you will be okay. And I work with a lot of recovering codependents and betrayed partners, and I actually believe sometimes it's easier for the addict to get it because they've tried so long. It's actually a little harder for somebody that's had some success. But we find that perfectionism is incredibly close to shame. And our world needs to discuss shame way more often. And I get why they don't want to. It doesn't feel good, but we are all walking around with that. And so if we can
Yeah.
continue to have conversations, the shame can't stay if we start talking about it.
Yeah, shout out to George Snyder. We did a lot of life and recovery strategists. We did a lot of episodes on Hawkins, who wrote the book
Mm,
Letting Go, who knew Bill and Bob in the 12-step program, right? When that was founded. And he went in, he went another way with that. He was a kinesthesiologist. I always
mhm.
butcher that name, but you know what I'm talking about. People who deal
Uh-huh.
with energy and movement.
Yes.
He very interesting. He's passed now, but he talks a lot about it. I've heard a lot of recordings about how shame is the lowest vibration, and really just the group. And one of the things that he said that was interesting about groups, and I believe that we have this on Recovered Life because I could feel it in our discussions,
Right.
Kristina, our Recovered Life discussions, is that the group itself lifts people out of the shame
Yes.
long enough so that they could look around and to say,
Mhm.
hey, there's an opportunity here for me to live a different kind of life, right? Hey,
So
there's
true.
another idea that I could lock onto. And I think that this is such the magical thing that I have found in recovery is that, shame really is the lowest vibration. I mean, Hawkins talks about it. He wrote a whole book about letting go, wrote a whole book about like shame, about how shame is. And, the interesting thing is when you dive into this letting go, powerlessness stuff, you cannot not talk about shame. So I'm so glad that you brought that up, though they're aligned for some reason. But the question that he presents is, where did this shame come from? Many people in recovery feel shame, and
Mhm.
they have nothing to feel shameful for. It's almost been like imparted on them
Yes.
generationally. And we see this, right, with people who are recovered from parents and family members who are who were alcoholics or dysfunctional.
So, so true. And shame is universal. So it's kind of this thing about do whatever you can do to shove it down and, do anything that you have to do so that people can't see it. And it's actually one of the things that we should talk about most often because it dissipates when empathy enters, which is why I think peer support groups work.
Yeah, they do. Oh, well, I think I don't even know if there's an argument about peer support groups working anymore. Like, I don't even, now I've heard that. I've heard that in the past. I think that was a late, that was a 90s thing.
Yes.
A 90s thing. It's like, well, why are we spending money? Why are we supporting this? Why are we spending time? People just need to buck up. They can't drink like their fellows, and that's it. Right.
Yes.
But we found that doesn't work. And as look, one of the great things is that we could see the government throwing millions and millions, if not billions of dollars into the recovery world, and it just not working. I mean, flat out, you'll see, you'll see millions of dollars being spent, but then you'll see somebody take $100,000. Like, I have a buddy who works here in the Valley. They'll take $100,000 and they'll get, numerous families sober.
Right.
Off of that, and productive and happy in doing it. Why? It's because they have that community element. So
true. I wouldn't be here without the community. Truly.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, you know what? I more about this powerless topic. I'm going to put a poll on Recovered Life. We'd love everybody to go vote at recoveredlife.us. And if you're not a member, you can join for free. And I'll give a little plug before we go into the next segment here. But I'm going to put up a little poll, Kristina, and I'd love people to comment and answer on it. Is do you have a hard time surrendering to your ideas? Right? Do you have a hard time surrendering? And I'm curious to see what people's response is. I'm always shocked when I put up these polls, because I think it's one way, and then it's always either in the middle or something else.
Interesting. I can't wait to see it. I'll go on and vote for sure.
Okay, definitely. Everybody join us on that poll. We're going to put that onto the network here in the next couple of minutes.
Keep the conversation going. Join Recovered Life, a community of like-minded people who are looking to live their best recovered lives. Membership is free, and you can apply at recoveredlife.us.